I want to give you an overview of how the meeting will work today. We're obviously all being asked to make sacrifices, so we ask your patience as we work through what has been certainly an unprecedented time in the history of this agency in our state. So we are holding this meeting virtually to be in compliance with the President and the Governor's guidance of social distancing, and we've never done this before. So again, please be patient with us. We're going to try to run this meeting as normal as possible. However, public comment will happen through the chat feature on Zoom, which we're using to video conference the meeting. You can type your comments for us to read during the meeting. Please provide your name, who you represent, what city you are, and your comment. People who are phoning in can only listen. We do not have the ability to allow comment through the phone line. So again, if you have public comment, it will need to come through the chat feature on Zoom, not through telephone. I obviously want to thank all the men and women in this great agency for the personal sacrifices that we've had to make. As a bit of personal reflection, this can be both metaphorical and literal, but those of us who grew up in the kind of the background that I did in the Roman Catholic faith view this as a time of ashes. And that simply means that on Ash Wednesday, those of us who participate in this particular ritual are given ashes to reflect upon our mortality and the fragility of life. And I think this is a period of sacrifice, it's a period of fasting. But I also believe that both metaphorically, if you are not of this faith or a believer, on Easter Sunday is a time of rebirth, and a time hopefully that we as a nation and as a state in 3 weeks will be able to work through some of this and begin to bring upon some normalcy to an otherwise very difficult situation. So for all those in the agency that are being challenged, we know that you're dealing not only with personal stress and anxiety, you also have loved ones that are facing uncertainty in their businesses, and we are going to be as supportive as possible, and especially supportive of the 55,000 license holders that we have been tasked to regulate. It's a very challenging time for our industry, and we are listening, and we are trying to be as much of an advocate as we possibly can. So we want to continue to hear from you, and we are doing absolutely everything we can to be as accommodative as we can without compromising the standards of the agency and obviously without compromising public safety. So with that, thank you for members of our industry. We wish you well, and all of us hope that we will emerge from this reborn in a new environment this spring. So with that, I'm going to open this meeting. The time is 10:35. First agenda item is called to order. January 28th, 2020. The quorum is present. At this time, both virtually and here, we are going to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. The next agenda item is approval of commission meeting minutes of November 26, 2019. I so move. Is there a second?
January 28, 2020.
Beg your pardon. Okay, then that's not what's on here. Okay. Am I back one?
No, you're fine. This is January 28, 2020.
Okay.
Minutes.
Very well. Approval of commission meeting minutes from January 28, 2020. I stand corrected. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Commissioner Atkins, thank you. Minutes are approved as written. Please record your vote. I'm not seeing anything.
It's, I think you might be on the wrong.
I don't know, I hit forward. Yeah, that's the January 28th. How do we get into where I push that? It just goes through this. All right. Now we're good. All right, the minutes are approved as written. Our votes have been recorded. And now it gives me great pleasure to swear in a new commissioner, which is an honor and privilege. And so before we begin, I'd like to read a little bit of background on Commissioner Hassan Mack. Hassan K. Mack, known as Mack, is an attorney with McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton, where he serves as bond counsel for numerous state agencies and political subdivisions. He most recently served as chairman of the Texas Southern University Board of Regents. He also served on the Texas Bond Review Board and is deputy general counsel and director of intergovernmental relations for the Office of the Lieutenant Governor. He received his bachelor's degree from the C.T. Bauer College of Business at the University of Houston, go Cougs, and the Juris Doctor from the Thurgood Marshall School of Law at Texas Southern University. He's a member of the State Bar of Texas, the National Association of Bond Lawyers, and Commissioner Mack was appointed by Governor Abbott on March of this year, 2020, with a term set to expire November 15th, 2025. So at this time, Commissioner, you would please, I guess, should we do it up here or should we step down below?
Either way.
Okay, let's just do it up here. This is great. And the compliance with social distancing, I'll refrain from shaking your hand, but I'll be enthusiastic to do so the next time. So, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Hassan K. Mack, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the Office of Commissioner with the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission of the State of Texas, and will, to the best of my ability, obey, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States and the state of Texas, so help me God. Congratulations, and rather than a handshake, that's got to be unprecedented. All right. Thank you very much. And while unfortunately we don't have the ability to do it now, we know that when we get back to normal, we want to appropriately recognize the tireless and continuous efforts of Commissioner Steen, who is now stepping down. Commissioner Mack is taking her place. So, Wheezy, we wish you the best. We thank you so much for your service, and we will absolutely recognize you appropriately as soon as we get through this time in the agency's history. So thank you. Commissioner Mack, would you like to say anything?
You know, it's an interesting time, a time of uncertainty, and I hope that in the near future we get back to normal, both for TABC's sake as well as the state. I don't have much to say other than I want to get doing the work on behalf of the citizens of Texas here at this agency under your leadership. So I appreciate all the kind words and look forward to getting to work.
Thank you, Commissioner. Congratulations. So at this time, General Nettles.
Yes, sir. So because of the restrictions, I'm going to be presenting all the agency reports. You might get bored of listening to me, but we're going to start off with our compliance reporting application. So we originally, just to bring you up to speed, in February of 18, came up with the ideal, put it together, developed the rulemaking process, and then rolled it out. The mandatory reporting period was from September 1 of 19 through January 31st of 20. This is essentially the timeline of how we rolled it out, and we finished we extended a grace period from the beginning of February 20 to 2/29/20. And out of the permits, we ended up with 34,513 reports being submitted. For our first shot, and our first effort, I thought that was tremendous success. I quite frankly expected only to get 30%. We're well into the 60% range there, and all because of Dexter Jones and the folks that worked on this. They did a tremendous job. Interestingly, the questionnaire that accompanies the application, very straightforward, but about 51% of the submitted reports ended up being flagged, which means they answered a question in a way that caused an issue for us. And so what will happen now is the auditors typically will call them to make sure. Some of it was as simple as some problems we had with the technology because their permit says they were in one location. When they did the compliance app, it said there were 2 addresses down the street. That was an internal problem. I think we fixed that as we went along. But there were some other challenging issues. Most of them involved signs that they did not have. So we're able to go to them and tell them they can print the signs from our website, put them up. But there were some other educational issues that we're working through. In front of you now is the survey results. After we did the application, we asked them, what device did you use? As you can see, iPhones were almost 70% of the total usage, with Samsung, Androids being the additional 20%, and then some peripherals. But then we asked them, did you experience any problems when you went through the application? Only a little under 10% indicated yes. The majority of people had no problems, which I thought was a huge success for us.
Well done.
And then, were the questions that were asked appropriate for your permit which you hold? And so, said yes, about 10% were neutral, with only about 2% saying that they were inappropriate. And we believe that's a response to a need for education versus the question not actually being inappropriate. Overall experience or satisfaction with the application, well into 85%. We're very satisfied with it. And with 12% being neutral, only about 2% out there that were not satisfied. Problems, if you experienced problems, what was your overall satisfaction with the help received from either the agency or our vendor that dealt with the app issues? 46% satisfied, about 12% neutral. The 42% were not applicable. Only about 2% said they weren't satisfied. So I think overall it was a huge success for us. Some of the challenges that came out with survey results that they raised with us is better mapping GPS, which is what we identified as a potential problem. More languages available. The number 1 language requested was Spanish, so we're working with the vendor on how to roll that out for the next September of 20, when that would be a requirement again. Some of the additional comments you can see, we're almost all praising this as innovative for the agency and for industry. Next, I want to turn to the next item. But before I do, I want to make a comment. So, through my professional career, I've worked on a lot of staffs, 3- and 4-star general officer staff, some multi-agency. The work that you're about to see, I think, is some of the finest that I've ever had the privilege to present. I wish the teams that developed this were able to present it to you, but I think it's important to start talking about it. So what we did was get everybody together and said, okay, what did the legislature just ask us to do? What are our priorities from the end of session to the next legislative session? And these are going from the lowest priority to the highest priority, although they're all neck and neck, really. So the number one priority is handled by the number four priorities handled by Strategic Initiative and Performance Improvement Division. What I've asked them to do is, first, what is the end state that we're trying to accomplish? TABC effectively implementing the legislative mandates to streamline the alcohol beverage code and reduce regulatory burden on our fellow Texans and Texas industry. To accomplish that, they identified key tasks that they felt like the agency needed to be able to accomplish in order to meet that end state. And then we started rating it. And as you can see, we're green, although we're not complete, obviously. I have some concerns, as we all do. What does this coronavirus do to our ability to accomplish these things? But the key task, we are on target with all of them over 40% being accomplished to roll out this fourth priority for the agency. Subject to questions, I'm going to go to priority number 3. That's being handled by our Office of Inspector General, who also currently does the training. So this is building capability within the agency. So the end state is set conditions to influence a culture to change within TABC that fosters an elite organization while simultaneously influencing industry culture to promote engagement and voluntary compliance. Identified 4 key tasks in order for the agency to be able to accomplish that. And they've begun tracking it. Some of the challenges we have at risk of not being accomplished, and this is the Inspector General's evaluation, complex agency observations and improved project design. But all that tells us is we need to apply more resources to help that get accomplished. So I think we're in good shape overall. Subject to questions, I'm going to move on to priority number 2. Building capacity within the agency. This is primarily our ITD effort, but it isn't, because it really touches every part of the agency. Sunset fundamentally changed the way the agency fundamentally changed the alcohol beverage code. This will fundamentally change the way the agency interacts with our constituents, our customers. So the end state is to provide exemplary customer service by how we engage with TABC employees, industry partners, through modernizing technological tools and streamlining business processes, and shorten the time required to get industry applicants into the business. We've taken a couple of looks at the cost of not putting people in business right away. About every 15 days costs the state of Texas, we think, approximately $13 million. So we're trying to go from into the 45-day range down to 30, which would put more money into the state budget. Those key tasks are critical. They involve not only developing the process, but training and modernizing the workforce, changing our business processes, making sure that as we move things online, we are securing them by not only plan but implementation and training. We have a really good idea of what our technology platforms and the solutions are going to look like, but we're just now developing the high-level requirements. We are on task, but some of this is we can't train our employees until we roll out the four big software programs. And one of them, the biggest one, of course, is AIMS. And the agency LAR, we've not begun because it will kick off next month, run through mid-August, although we've been talking about it already. And of course, continual improvement cycle. How do we create a feedback loop between not only the employees and ITD, but the consumer, the industry, and ITD? So until we roll out these software services, we have not focused on doing that, although that is one of our key tasks in order to make sure we serve this industry and the agency provides, 5-star customer service. Finally, human trafficking, our number one priority. Now, this is going to look a little different because some of our efforts are law enforcement sensitive, so we're not going to brief them in an open forum. Our end state, however, remains the same: effectively demonstrate, communicate. TABC is an elite law enforcement organization, an organization capable of combating human trafficking connected to TABC licensed locations in Texas. Those are the key tasks that they've identified. And these are our performance and how we accomplish that. Now, some of the challenges we still have is with human trafficking cases, like a lot of our other complaints, we're averaging between 25 and 30% violation discovery. Part of that is the elusive nature of the criminals. So we get a complaint as to a location, we can go check it out, but if the girls don't happen to be there that day, then we come up empty-handed. It's difficult for us to stay on station without drawing attention to our agents and them understanding that they're now being under surveillance. So we're trying to find more effective and efficient ways to do that. My goal is to get that between the 45 and 50% range of success so that we can identify when human trafficking is occurring there, what nights, so we become more effective in doing that. On the left-hand side, you see some of the successes we've had. 58 human trafficking undercover operations, 31 of which TABC served in the lead, and this is only from our special investigative unit. But so far, we've rescued 68 victims, 5 of them were children, filed 137 criminal charges through the local district attorneys, and 12 narcotic purchases. Significant for us, but probably not significant in the overall impact to the criminal enterprise. So our next presentation, Robert was going to give this, but again, because of the size of the crowd restrictions, I'm going to be doing it. So we started working on a strategic plan on how we would impact human trafficking. So last year we started working on how do we increase complaints coming into the agency if it's associated with our industry members. Working with government partners through direct engagement from our agents out in the field, letting them know what we were doing. We've also created the Criminal Intelligence Unit, and we started working with the different fusion centers and intelligence collection capabilities of law enforcement across the state of Texas, letting them know how we can help them and how they can help us. We're working with the Texas A&M Engineering Extension Service for online training, not only for internally for our agency, but also for the TQOs training requirements, so that there are 1,700 law enforcement organizations across the state of Texas, and we'll have the opportunity to get in front of them and how TABC can be a resource for them in the fight against human trafficking. We've reached out to our industry, provided training to our wholesale distributors. That's what Jared had briefed y'all on last year. We're also expanding that, looking to reach out to package stores, convenience stores, and the Texas Restaurant Association with training so that if they are in a permitted location, those employees know that we're the agency to be contacted so that we can take the appropriate, start an investigation, take the appropriate action. We've also partnered with the Office of the Governor and the Attorney General on identifying victim services, working with advocacy organizations across the state of Texas, because as you might expect, at 2 o'clock in the morning when we conduct one of these operations and we rescue these victims, we need to have people that we can refer them to so they can get the services they need in order to break free from that lifestyle. The second phase is the analysis, and that's what I was talking about earlier, is how do we go from 25% success rate to a 50% success rate. We've stood up the Criminal Intelligence Unit with research and data analysis capability. We're also working with the universities, Texas A&M, Sam Houston State, and Southern Methodist University to bring research capabilities on the human trafficking problem so we can identify behavioral issues and where those choke points are for this criminal enterprise. Internally, we focused our training so that we have a whole of agency effort against human trafficking and trying to enhance collaboration within our agency so that we try to break down some of the stovepipes of excellence that exist in all state agencies. Finally, operations. For human trafficking, we tend to do 3 types. A targeted operation against a alcohol permit location, assisting local law enforcement on intel operations, which then could lead us to an alcohol beverage industry member, and finally, task force operations. One issue we have, though, and although we are successful, I'm looking at how do we evaluate the way we conduct those operations. Is there a better way to do that? Can we provide better undercover training? And I think the answer is all that is yes. So we're in the process of developing our training division, developing an undercover school so that not only SIU agents, but our law enforcement agents can begin to be better trained to take on that undercover persona. So when they're in somewhere working, they don't get outed, or they're more comfortable being there undercover. And finally, working with legal, how do we measure our results? Of course, one is always the amount of money that we see. So one of the issues I have is if we're doing an operation, how do we impact the criminal enterprise's tool? How do we take away their resources in order to continue to operate in our state? So we're looking at ways that we can seize funds, identify those funds, so when we go in and do a raid or an operation, we do all those things at once. The other is working to do additional administrative criminal seizures. And I know that we're trying to figure out if that's something we can do under the current statute or if that's something, an additional tool that we need to request. The number of permits canceled is one action, one way indicator.
Hey, can you give us an example of administrative criminal seizure?
So currently, in order to initiate asset forfeiture or asset seizure, we have to go and charge them with a criminal, some kind of criminal activity. Our goal is, can we use our administrative authority under the Alcohol Beverage Code then to say, okay, we've taken this step, we know we've met the administrative threshold for human trafficking, what can we do in order to seize those assets under our code? Right, and just put it into the regular forfeiture process. Is that,
I think that's right, and then trying to identify ways, if there's currently authorization in the code, can we broaden our rule authority via rule, or is it identifying needs maybe to bring to the legislature's attention? I think that's the question.
so the other tracking, the financial impact, so I just had them look at, because we're trying to come up with okay, what kind of impact do we make? Since May, when the legislature told us that human trafficking is one of our number one priorities, what impact do we make? And so we've come up with some numbers. I think it's about $2.3 million we believe that we removed from criminal enterprises. But we're working back through those numbers so that we can make sure that they're well justified. And finally, the number of victims that we rescue and refer for services. I think these are potential measurements that we can say that we're effectively utilizing the authority and the funding that the legislature gave us.
General Ellis, do you mind going back to page 23, please, your human trafficking progress report? I had a question on that. There we go. So if I am to understand how the metric works, so administrative cases, looks like you said you're at 28%, your goal is 50%. So in this particular graph, 100% equals 50%. Is that right? So 100%, if that green line was all the way to the right, that means that you would have 50% administrative cases.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay, so, and how about news releases, social media, press conferences? What defines 100%?
I don't know the answer.
Okay. I mean, are we not having enough press conferences? Are we not putting out enough news releases? Are we not on enough social media charts? And so I'm just curious as to what represents finality and completion as a relate. And I realize you're in a bit of a disadvantage because you're having to wear about 30 hats today. So we'll talk about it later. That's
right.
fine.
Using those tools that we have in our communication toolbox in order to drive one, raise awareness, and then drive folks to make those complaints either through our app or online to this agency if it relates to an alcohol beverage industry. You know, unfortunately, we still run into the challenge that people go, "You are involved in human trafficking?"
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
every day.
And we're all well aware of it, but there are a lot of industry members I think out there that still don't know. You know, one of the challenges I quickly realized once I got here is we only touch about 48% of industry on a regular basis. The other 52%, they could care less what we do. They don't go to our website. They don't read our information because the only time they want to touch our agency is when they have to renew their permit. And because their job is to run their business. And I understand that, but we're trying to figure out new ways and creative ways to reach them.
Understood. I have no further questions on your law enforcement presentation. Commissioners, any further questions?
No.
I do have one comment. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, Commissioner Marino, yes, please.
Wonderful. I just want, and again, thank everyone for pulling together. The TABC staff has been absolutely incredible. I know putting up with my inaccuracies on technology, so I appreciate it. But as we run through this presentation, I really don't want to take lightly the numbers that the general just told us. 68 victims is 68 individuals that we basically changed their life, and hopefully in a positive way as we continue to wrap around resources for them, which is a huge passion, I think, of all of ours. And so let's just not run through these numbers and say just 68, because that 68 really is priceless to those individuals and families that have been able to be reunited with them.
Absolutely well said. Thank you.
Okay, sir. The next item requires a vote. and it's a request to exceed capital limitations.
Right. And
The letters attached in the board doc.
compliance report, Commissioner, PDF. Template on, no, that's it, right?
Go down to exceed,
Request to exceed capital
we're
limitations.
gonna do the letter.
Okay, but the process for voting.
Yes, I'll open that whenever you tell me you're ready.
Got it, okay. Procedurally, do you want to go through your presentation first and then we vote? I would think that would be in order, or what are we supposed to do?
So that's the only slide to this presentation we're looking at.
The letter is the only attachment.
The letter. So, Commissioners, you have access to the letter under request to exceed Lab 2020, LAB, excuse me, not Lab. If you would like to review that. And for the record, it's only a one-page letter. General, do you have access to the letter?
I did not have it.
Okay, you know what, I'm going to read it.
Okay.
I will just read it to make sure that in case anyone has any technological problems, they can understand what we're voting on. This letter is to Sarah Hicks, Office of the Governor, Budget and Policy Division, and Jerry McGinty. The Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission would like to purchase a liquid chromatograph mass spectrometer for the agency lab, which will exceed capital authority. As a result, the TABC is requesting authority to exceed capital budget limitations outlined in FY 2020-21. General Appropriations Act, Article 9, Section 14.03, transfers capital budget. Request to exceed capital budget authority totals $308,789.84. Funds will be used to purchase a piece of equipment for our laboratory, specifically a liquid chromatograph mass spectrometer. I'm not going to say that again. You guys know what I'm talking about. The use of this equipment allows for an in-depth analysis of alcoholic beverages to ensure that they are not altered after manufacture. It will identify compounds that are not the result of natural fermentation, such as THC or CBD. It is important for the agency to have the ability to test alcoholic beverages in this manner, as it currently cannot test for two of the major cannabinoid species. This equipment will allow the agency chemists to acquire a full profile on all beverages tested. Purchase will assist the agency in ensuring the health and safety of the public, is in direct correlation with our agency's mission and purpose. For that reason, we respectfully request your approval to exceed not only the total capital budget limitation of 25%, but also the line item limitation of 25% as outlined in FY 2021 General Appropriations Act. Article 9, Section 1403.
General Nettles, is this something you're seeing now where we've got alcoholic beverages that are being cannabis infused, and thus the need for this testing?
Yes. So this is a standard request, but we have the challenge is, we have folks that are wanting to add THC to, or flavoring to alcoholic beverages, and some of it is legitimate, some of it is not. Right now, currently, we don't have the ability to test that. And there is an allowance, I think it's like 5%, don't quote me on that, but there is an allowance currently in the law that allows them to do that, but nobody seems to have the capability. There are only 2 labs in Texas where you can test this to make sure that it doesn't exceed the statutory authorization. So this would allow us to internally be able to do that.
And this would be a single unit where you would take samples, send them to this centralized TABC location to be able to do this testing?
So all the alcohol sampling is done here in Austin. It all comes up here.
Great. Okay.
Commissioners, further questions?
We have a motion.
Okay, I move to request, to approve the exceeding of capital limitations as described in the letter. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Marino, thank you for the second,
We'll take a vote.
and we will now vote. And we are approved? We are approved. Those numbers.
I guess.
Okay, there we go. All right, sir, so, we're getting ready to start our spring academy, which, as you might expect, is a little bit of a challenge for us. We currently have 30 vacancies. We vetted 203 applicants. We identified 26 cadets, extended them offers. They've accepted. They've agreed to leave their current employment. So we're trying to figure out how we go forward with this. This is the demographics of the class demographics versus the 2018 demographics in Texas. It is important to me that we start trying to make our agents look more like Texas if possible, because we have some challenges. Getting folks into certain bars, restaurants, and not being identified as law enforcement.
Can you go back to that slide one more time, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Here's the level of experience we're bringing in.
So when you said vacancies was 30, 26 in, does that mean we have a deficit of 4, or does that mean we have a deficit of 30?
Currently, we have a deficit of 30
Right?
in law enforcement. Assuming these 26 make it through the academy, then we'll be down to a deficit.
Got it. I just want to make sure my math was right. Thank you.
The level of experience we're bringing on, the majority 18, 0 to 5, but we do have quite a bit of experience beyond that. So, looks to be a very good class.
Great.
The accepted and residential location, so the accepted location is where they're coming from. The residential location is where we will be assigning them once they graduate from the academy. Region 5, we'll get the bulk of them with Region 4 and then Region 3.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you explain the difference between accepted and residential?
So accepted locations where they're coming from,
Right?
we recruited them out of, and they made the academy.
Right?
Residential location will be where they're going to be assigned.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Do our regions have any correlation with the disaster district regions DPS has, et cetera?
So
You know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. They overlap some regions. But almost all our majors or supervisors are in contact with the disaster region,
Right.
which is typically
But I think
led
Houston's
by,
like DDC District maybe 2, I think. Is that
typically
right?
led by a DPS major. And
Right.
they are in conversations with them, especially if there's a regional activation.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So this year, where our plan is still to use the ACC Public Safety Training Center in Buda. It's a tremendous facility that's available to us. The challenge right now is ACC, like all universities, is closed. So we're hoping that we can get them open. They have an indoor firing range, state-of-the-art. They have a force-on-force training area, which, as you can see, has a catwalk where the trainer instructor can oversee, and they also have the ability to video them to allow them to see what their mistakes were. They can walk them back through the process. Literally one of the best facilities that we've been able to use, assuming we get to use it in the near future. They also have the EVOC, Emergency Vehicle Operations course, where they do the driver training there in Buda, so great facility. And finally, training rooms, gyms where they can use and do the defensive tactics training portion of our academy. Potential legislative dates based upon the current calendar. Some of the things we picked out, of course, this is all subject to moving to the right. What I've asked training to do is give me some options. How do we bring them in? We know that part of the class is online. Can we use online training tools in order to have them actually initiate the academy, so we start getting them to put them to work, and then hopefully ACC and the other universities will open and we'll be able to actually use that facility. But they're also working on what happens if we don't. So we put them out to a field training officer, go ahead and assign them to their regions, and then if and when those come back, we just make it part of their sustainment training. So we're working through some options based upon the changing nature of these facilities being available to us.
Thank you.
So additional dates, of course, we want to bring, if possible, bring in the staffers and legislative members to show them what we're doing in training if we're able to actually complete it on site.
Are they allowed to do the driver's course?
What's that, sir?
Are they allowed to do the driver's course?
Well, we would put them in a vehicle with one of our agents. Our agents would do the driving.
You realize, Commissioner Mack, that's your first test as you get.
All right.
It's our own initiation.
All right, well.
Anyway, thank you.
Fun.
Thank you. Any questions, commissioners?
Actually, I have one question on the 2020 Academy update. We broke it out into different regions on page 4. Anyway, it doesn't have to be today. I know you probably don't have this available, but for the residential location, can you give the demographics of this different cadets, their background, actually ethnicity? Kind of want to see where we're sending certain acceptance cadets to the different parts of the state, because clearly the Valley's probably going to have more of a Hispanic play, but I'm interested in regions 4 and 3 to see what we're doing as far as sending cadets out.
We can certainly get you that information. I know our human resources, they track that information for us because it's a state reporting requirement. But you're absolutely right. You know, some of the challenges we have is you can't send an agent that looks like me into McAllen, Texas, and be very successful. You know, so, and quite frankly, the folks that are born down there, we tend to rotate around the agency, but they always end up back down there. At least that's my experience in talking to them. Uniquely, one of our most successful segments or demographics seems to be female agents. I don't know. I guess folks look at them, they don't think they're law enforcement. You know, so they tend to be the ones that particularly have a high success rate for us. But we can certainly get you that information.
Other questions? All right, please continue.
So next is our communications update. We, as you know, have made an effort and out of Hyde developed a rather robust communications department. And part of that was twofold. One, tell our story, but as we go through this software transition, we knew that it would be important to be able to not only communicate with our own employees and make sure they know what's happening, to kind of reduce that anxiety, but also with industry. This is how you do it, how can we help you? A side benefit has been, they've done a tremendous job during this coronavirus situation. But, so they're now fully staffed. These are all the members of the team. Couple of videos. These do not play, but they're available on our YouTube site where you can see them. We do have the next one, I believe, is a video. So we have photography capability, writing and editing, pushing out information. They've become proficient at putting out press releases on getting that information out to industry members and to the general public. A robust social media campaign. A lot of people don't look at social media, but a lot of people do. And a lot of the people that do impact the policy decisions that are made down at the Capitol. So we want to make sure that they understand what we're doing over here. So during January's Human Trafficking Awareness Month initiative, these are all the things that they accomplished. Tremendous to try to get out the story, not only of the governor's focus, but also this agency's focus and how we were engaged in the fight human trafficking. The potential reach of the audience was 11 million people, 11 million Texans, which I thought was tremendous, based upon the releases and the media outlets that picked them up, is how they came up with that calculation. Finally, we have a new video.
He's gonna play it on the
Knowing that I'm one of the steps in ensuring that the public is buying what they are paying for, I enjoy that. My name is Joe Shorp, and I'm the chemist for the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission. My job entails testing alcoholic beverages so that whenever you go to a liquor store, grocery store, the alcohol content is what it's stated within an allowable variance. So I'll transfer it from the cans into a glass bottle, and then I'll analyze from there. I prefer to have a clear liquid to something that's hazy or has any sort of suspended solid. You can see the difference beginning to end. It's as simple as taking your analysis container, placing it in the machine, pressurizing it, starting the analysis, and then the machine will do all the rest of it for you. Once that's done, record the results. I'll annotate, make the reports, email them out, and get them back to the customer and start all over again. My satisfaction at work is, it's important because it deals with the public safety, and knowing that I'm one of the steps in ensuring that the public is buying what they are paying for, I enjoy that.
Nicely done, nicely done.
Thank you. So the additional lab equipment that we have requested will give us additional capability within our lab. So, and finally, the coronavirus communications, they have been hard at work, not only communicating internally with our employees, answering media questions, launched a new telework webpage so that our employees know what to do, how to do it, videos for staff and industry, and they've been participating in daily calls twice a day with the governor's office about the coronavirus and what's going on in the state, and pushing that out to, my goal was for the agency to be a resource not only to our employees, but to our communities. So we get that information out there about what's going on and try to bring down some of the anxiety and apprehension that exists currently.
Do we know if we have any agency employees and/or family members that have been afflicted?
So we do not have anyone yet that has the coronavirus. We have a couple that thought they had it, but they have not exhibited the symptoms, so they've not been tested. Got a couple that have self-quarantined because they learned of exposure, but they've not developed any symptoms of the virus.
That's good news.
General,
So,
this is Boatwright.
yes,
Just
sir.
want to make a real quick comment on our communications before we go. I know how hard the agency's been working, and I've looked on our website and I've noticed all the things that we put on there. I'm aware of at least some of the communications that we have all over state government, trying to do the best job we can. I know that staff has been working flat out and they're exhausted. And I want to acknowledge that and thank staff for that. I've tried to publicize a little bit of that myself through my social media. I also want to say something to our regulated entities. I've gotten a few calls this week from friends and acquaintances, people I hadn't talked to in a long time, who are concerned about communication and who are very, very scared for the future of their businesses in their industry. They think that they're going to have to lay people off. They don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. They're terrified. And I just want to make sure as we go through all of these extremely important initiatives that we do, like human trafficking and the other things that we as a good government agency do or privileged to do and have to do, that we constantly think about what these businesses and the people who work there and the people who depend on them are going through, and the fears that they have, and the extremely difficult, just awful decisions that they're having to make right now and that they will have to make over the next few days. And that as we work on our communications, as we put things on the website, as we field calls from people, that we keep at the top of our minds, in addition to everything else that we have going on that you've already been through, that we keep at the top of our minds what these people, the real people, are going through, and that we are maximally responsive to their needs, and that we try to anticipate their needs and help them get through this with as little trouble as possible. There's going to be some, there already has been a lot, but that we help them get through this the absolute best that we can. People are hurting out there, and they're going to hurt some more, and I want to make sure that we're on top of it. And I want to thank everybody for what they've done so far, and I want to encourage them to do more in the future.
Well said, Commissioner Boatwright. Thank you. I absolutely echo and agree with your sentiment and your comment, and it's well-timed, and I know well-received.
Well, we've certainly been working with industry on a daily basis to solicit from them their recommendations, and then seeing how we can address those, if we can take action or if we have to get additional authority. So we are well aware of those issues, and we're working as hard as we can.
Other comments? Thank you, Commissioner. General.
So the next section is setting fees and establishing penalties. The Sunset Bill charged TABC with developing this process for setting fees. The challenge we currently have is in September of 21, those fees go out of the code. So we have to adopt those rules to address those fees. Otherwise, there will be no revenue from the sale of alcohol in Texas. So our goal was to try to get it in place before the legislative session, so that if we didn't have it quite right, the legislature could tell us and adjust the statute. So they gave it to us. We've been engaging industry right up until the coronavirus broke out, and then we've kind of put a halt on this. We're trying to figure out how we go forward, what the right pace of going forward will be, realizing that, just like Commissioner Boatwright mentioned, our industry members out there are engaged in not worrying about what the regulation is, but how to keep their businesses afloat.
Yep.
So we may push some of this to the right, but this is a overview of what the work we've done so far. So the idea was that no business sector would be overly penalized or have small businesses would not suffer particular undue hardship, develop a periodic review process for the fee amounts as we go forward, and have a net neutral or a neutral impact to the revenue of the state of Texas. At least collect as much as we collected the last 2 years with a projected need to collect more based upon the growth of the industry. And part of the challenge is, quite frankly, we're looking at apples and oranges. So we had 72 permits. They did away with 1,400 of them, or they did away with 14. That eliminated $325,000 in revenue for the agency. $3 million. $3.5 million in revenue for the agency, and how do we make that up? And then as we go forward with these things, the permits aren't going to look the same.
Right.
So you'll get a different, so we tried to take it based upon the authority that they were giving and what they had previously paid for that authority and what they'll be paying for that now. So for some people, that's going to be an increase because now they can do more with that permit than they could do before. And they may not necessarily want to do that, but that's not necessarily an option that the agency has. That was done by the legislature. So we started from scratch. We looked at revenues the last 2 years as a benchmark for the total revenue that we needed. We had a simple team from every agency department was represented. Each department provided an assessment of what was the amount of time or the regulatory effort required for each permit type. Because the idea is that, fine fees and surcharges, currently, they fund the agency. So if a particular type of permit causes us to spend more regulatory time on it, then they should pay more. And we drafted a rule and schedule of fees. Currently, this is the timetable. Again, we're meeting later on this week to determine whether or not April 17th is the proper starting date for addressing that. We may have to slide that to the right, and then that would adjust some of the other dates. Obviously, we want to try to get it in place before September 21, but my goal would be to have it in place before the 21 legislative session.
Just also a little bit echoing what Commissioner Boatwright said and what you've just said. I think we all have to adjust our expectations, not only as an agency, but as a state. As all of you, we all know individuals personally that are in this business. I think a well-run restaurant has about a 10% net margin. The range is probably anywhere from 5% to 15%. Obviously, the higher is more of your high-end steak places, but you can do the math. When you have 30 days, losing 2 days of business is significant. Losing 30 days of business is going to be very significant and will be a challenge for a lot of companies and a lot of, bars and restaurants that we regulate. So I think all of us are very mindful of the challenges that are being faced. This is a multiplier. There's a multiplier effect. It's not just 1.4 million people in the alcohol and restaurant, bar and restaurant business. It's the tethers that from the leaseholders and the banks and the suppliers and the truck drivers. So, it's not a switch. We're not just going to flip a switch on April 3rd or April 14th and everything's going to be back to normal. It's going to be more like a rheostat, more like a dimmer, and it will begin to progress, and it's going to take some time. And all of us in our personal lives, as well as regulators, have to be patient and understanding that for some of these, the sad reality is for some of these, the switch may not turn on at all. But that's, that's something that we cannot control. The only thing we can do is be an open ear and a sensible sounding board for some of the issues that these businesses are facing and the anxiety that is ever present in our industry right now. So anyway, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Boatright again. I fully agree with you. Fully agree with every word you said. And I want to say we need to help these people at every turn. These are businesses. Businesses are important. They represent real people, real lives, children, whole families that need to be supported. And to the maximum extent possible, I want our agency, and I know that you do too, Mr. Chairman, to help people get through this nightmare for them and their industry. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Well said. General, please.
So the next portion that we're required by Sunset is to develop the matrix for violations. Currently, we don't have that. So the current rules schedule sanctions for public safety and some regulatory violations. Sunset recommendation to us was for us to develop that. And evaluate revising the cash credit penalties. Deadline for that is December of this year. So far, what we've done is develop a penalty calculation concept and created a worksheet. We assigned base penalty amounts to all regulatory violations, tested the worksheet by comparing the results to prior cases. We've been revising and calibrating that worksheet and base penalties. The concept was rolled out at a February stakeholder meeting. So the next steps for us, which is draft a rule and penalty policy and worksheet for stakeholders. We plan to do that in stakeholder meetings in April and June. Again, due to the current situation, I'm not sure April is going to be effective for us. Even though we've been engaging industry members prior to this, they have a lot on their plate, and we will adjust accordingly based upon how quickly we get past this and move forward. We had hoped to propose a rule and policy proposal in July commission agenda, and then publication adoption in September. That's the plan that we had developed before things happened the last 2 weeks. So, realizing we may be pushing this to the right, we have a deadline of December of 20. Try to make sure we make that, if at all possible. That's all I have, sir.
Okay. I believe this point is public comment. So if I may indulge you for a moment, I'm going to just kind of give a little bit more direction. We're receiving a lot of questions, all of you are, individually and collectively and as an agency, concerning the coronavirus. I want all of our viewers to know, and everyone listening, that TABC leadership is in daily conversation, multiple daily conversations with trade groups and organizations that represent your interest as members of this industry. We're also working with the governor's office, again, daily, to help develop opportunities to ensure Texas business can weather this storm. Governor Abbott has been an incredibly strong advocate for the industry since this crisis began. And I assure you he's heard your concerns and is taking steps to help you keep your business operating. In fact, last week, as you know, the governor approved 4 statutory waivers to help industry during this challenging time. TAB staff are working around the clock to answer your questions about COVID-19's impact. They are constantly updating TABC website tabc.gov, so please visit the agency's website to get the latest information. As again, we must ask for everyone's patience and cooperation as we all collectively have the same end state, and that is the perpetuation and success of the men and women in this state that run a $40 billion industry. And it's in everyone's best interest, whether you're in the industry or not, they succeed, and that we as an agency provide to the utmost of our ability every resource that these, look, they're patriots. They're solid businessmen and women, and we need to be there for them. So at this time, we will now be taking public comments, a little different than we've ever done before. As I said, this will be done through the Zoom system and will not be done through telephone or personally. If you wish to comment on any of these items that we've discussed on our agenda today, please use the chat feature. Detailed instruction for using the chat feature to comment are posted on our agency's website, and we'll now wait to see if any items are received.
60 seconds.
Okay, stand by, ladies and gentlemen, as we're assembling the data.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input. We've had some comments. As you may know, under the Open Meetings Act, we are not allowed to discuss topics not identified in our posted agenda. Because COVID-19 related comments are unrelated to the agenda, we're unable to consider and debate it. However, I would like to recognize the individuals that have sent in comments that were COVID-19 related, and all of these are proud members of the restaurant and alcohol industry, including Richard Peacock, restaurateur in San Antonio, Tim O'Neill, Eagle Distributing of Texarkana, Amy Cornwells, San Antonio restaurateur, Matt Martin, a Dallas attorney. Also, Mr. Kareem Hajar had sent us a note and specific questions as well. So I thank you for all of your input and for your questions. And
Mr. Chairman, if I can ask, is there a means in which the agency can respond to these questions?
General?
Yes, sir, we will. We'll take those after this meeting and put it with all the input we get from industry as we're trying to work through issues and how we can assist these industry members. So, yes, sir.
That would
Joe?
be great. To the point that everyone has brought up earlier, we have to do everything we can to assist the industry right now. And as you see just from these public comments, which in my tenure on the board, we have not had any comment, but we've got a flood coming in today. So anything that we can do to help address these concerns would be greatly appreciated and as timely as possible. If it's not something that we can address as part of this meeting now.
Commissioner Atkins, I fully agree with you. This is Boatwright. General, is there a way for you to report back on us on the responses to these comments? I would like to see, if possible, maybe it has to be an agenda item for the next meeting. I don't know. If it doesn't, if we could find out about it sooner, that would be great. But what I would like, if possible, is to know how we followed up with the people who commented, so that we can make sure that everybody is getting a maximally responsive, just the best response, the most detailed response that they can from our agency. Is there a way to report back to us on the responses these commenters received?
Sure, we can absolutely do that, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to just real quickly comment as well. I appreciate all my commissioners and our new commissioner for joining us today, and echo everything that they're saying. We're all understand the importance of the business industry, restaurant industry, all of our industry. One of the other things I've been actually looking at, and I appreciate the 124 people that joined us today, I've been actively looking on the chat, and some of them do have comments about something that we can't talk about today because it wasn't publicly posted, but there are really just some questions also just about clarification. And so again, if we can get back with the individuals on clarification on some of the rules that the governor has put forward, that will help as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Exactly, yes. Commissioners, thank you for those valuable comments. Agreed, wholeheartedly. So that concludes the public comment section. And at this time, we will now move into Section 5 rules. General Counsel Smith.
Chairman Lilly, Commissioner Mack, Commissioners in absentia, thank you for letting me present these rules today. My colleague Shana Horton typically does these, but because of the unique circumstances, I'm going to be presenting these rules today. We have one rule that's up for adoption. We have three rules that are up for publication. The rule that was up for adoption was presented and published following the January meeting. This rule has to do with the alcohol delivery driver training program. This was a product of the consumer delivery permit legislation that the legislature passed and the governor signed last year. We received no public comments on this rule. Basically, the rule lays out some parameters for developing a training program. Do you have any questions on this rule?
Nope.
No.
Okay. I move to approve adoption of Rule 50.32 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Commissioner Mack, thank you. We have a second. We will now vote. The ayes have it, so approved. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 5.2, this relates to Rule 31.1, the separation of duties between the commission and the executive director. This rule is really the sort of the foundational rule for the structure of the agency. There are three proposed or interrelated amendments to this rule. This is largely driven by the sunset bill from last session. The first piece is that the agency, any contested cases that go through a disciplinary hearing will now come to the board for final decision-making. This is the contested cases process that we've discussed now for a few months, in which we continue to work on. Historically, this function has been delegated to the executive director. Now, these contested cases that actually go through the hearing process will now be put before the board for final consideration. Do y'all have any questions on this particular piece of the amendments?
No.
Okay, the second piece has to do with settlements. So part of the sunset legislation was to create thresholds for case settlements that would come to you, the board members, for approval. There's two pieces to this. One is a monetary or sort of quantitative threshold that's set at $10 million or more. So if there was any proposed settlement of an amount in excess of $10 million, that would come before the board. The second piece is more qualitative in nature. If there is a case resolution, a settlement that sets some type of precedent or has important implications beyond just a dollar amount, this provides a mechanism for those settlements to come before the board as well. Do y'all have any questions on these case settlement amendments to the rule?
No.
Okay. The final piece of this has to do with the reporting structure of the General Counsel's office. Historically, for the last several years, my office has reported directly to the Commission. This changes that so that my office reports back directly to the Executive Director. I think a very important piece of this is the final amendment, subsection C13. So this highlights the fact that my relationship with y'all as board members doesn't change, right? This is an important clarification, I think reflects the day-to-day administrative realities of operating the agency, but I am still here to be y'all's counsel, and that maintains all facets of the attorney-client relationship and confidences. But if there's any questions about that, I think that's why the addition of subsection C13 is there. Y'all have any questions about that final amendment to the rule?
No.
Okay, thank you. I move to approve publication of amendment to Rule 31.1 as recommended by staff. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Marino, thank you. If I have a second, we will now vote. Motion carries, so approved. Mr. Smith?
All right, agenda item 5.3 is proposed publication of an amendment to Rule 41.54. This rule has to do with destruction of malt beverage products. The amendments would provide clarification and some relief for malt beverage products that are rendered inconsumable because of a natural disaster or otherwise, such as Hurricane Harvey. It adds some relief to retailers that are stuck in a bad situation like that. This is a product of a bill from last session. It's unrelated to the sunset bill. Do y'all have any questions on these proposed amendments?
No.
No questions. I move to approve publication of amendments to Rule 41.54 as recommended by staff. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Mack, thank you. We will now vote. So approved. Mr. Smith?
All right, the final rule up for consideration is agenda item 5.4. This is a minor technical amendment to Rule 50.1. This has to do with the training services for the consumer delivery drivers. This simply adds the consumer delivery driver to the heading of a rule so that it's clear that Rule 50.1 also refers to delivery driver programs and not just to the seller-server training programs that already exist. you have any questions on the proposed publication of this rule?
No questions. Excuse me, I move to approve publication of conforming amendments to Rule 5.01 as recommended by staff. Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Commissioner Marino, thank you. We have a second. We will now vote. Thank you.
That's all I have, sir.
Okay. We now move into executive session. Are provisions in place for us to proceed?
We have this group. I believe there's been no need to hold the executive session.
Okay. All right. Upon recommendation of council, we will not have an executive session today. Next is potential action on items discussed which we did not have, so there was no action taken there. And the closing items is the announcement of the next meeting date. Next regular scheduled commission meeting date is planned for Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. Commissioners, do you have a problem with that date?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
This is Boatwright. I don't want to blow things up. I'm trying to be helpful here, not irritating. But I was wondering whether we could have a meeting next week, the week after, have as many meetings as closely spaced together as possible, so that we can find out from the agency what we're doing to help our regulated businesses through this time, and what they want from us. We don't have to have all of the other extremely useful and professionally prepared presentations on other topics, but what about a meeting literally every week, every 10 days, something like that, where we do nothing but making sure that we're on top of everything that's happening in our industry, so that we can be responsive to the needs of the businesses and the people we regulate. Is that something that we can consider, rather than 2 months from now we do something next week or the week after, and we do that until we can catch our breath?
That is an excellent idea, and I think more communication is better. I mean, we're seeing daily press conferences from Washington. I think the only restriction would have to be open meetings, et cetera, and technology and logistics. Is that something that we can consider and work on to make sure we have that in place?
So we can certainly consider it, sir, and we can talk offline, but the idea would be if it's just an update, we can push that update out to all the commissioners, or we can, if there's something that needs action by the commissioners, then we can call either a regularly scheduled meeting or an emergency meeting as that is needed.
Okay. So why don't we do this? Let's take that into consideration, Commissioner Boatwright. It's an excellent suggestion. Let's talk about the realities of logistics. And the worst case is, I think we can have directed update calls from you, even if we cannot create an open records or an open meeting situation. So, perhaps we can have a weekly executive director update, which will allow us to provide you questions. And also, the other thing is comments, because all of us are getting individual calls from restaurant owners and bar owners and friends in the industry. And so making sure that there's an open forum whereby we can convey those thoughts to you and to the executive staff of the agency, I think would be very helpful. So let's work on a solution and a way to do that.
Yeah,
So I would think,
that sounds,
if I could,
that sounds good.
I'm sorry.
Good.
To echo Commissioner Boatwright's request. I do believe that the agency can properly and helpfully handle communication, but as we're addressing how that's going to happen, and because there are so many community concerns, potentially setting up that next meeting as quick as we can within the laws of open meetings would be great, and I think that'd be a great benefit for the public, and then hopefully internally we can work out how the communications are working, and so by the time we have that meeting, whether it be next week or the following week, we may have addressed this process and we're able to let the public know how we are handling these constant communication updates. But at least the public knows that we're on top of this, that we've asked for a report back, and we'll receive that within an open meeting setting.
I think one of the things we also would like to consider is, in light of logistics and hosting meetings, in that I think the uncertainty of the industry and the individuals that are reaching out to us in the governor's office isn't so much to put together a meeting of us, but to be able to communicate with them and to them almost on a daily basis or every other day or 72 hours or maybe weekly. I love Commissioner Lilly's idea of an executive director update every week for us. I think that would be incredible. But being able to put our communications team, who are a very solid, great team, to be able to communicate out to them in our industry, because that's really what they want. They want certainty, and they want to know that their questions are being answered. And whether that has to come to us as commissioners in a meeting, or be able to address it with the individuals at the agency, let's just be, I just want to be mindful of everyone's time and streamlining that, as we are giving the customers what they want, which is communicating back to them clarity of some of these regulations, and making sure that their questions are received and how they're going to get answers back.
So, Commissioner Marino, this is Boatwright again. I read you loud and clear. That all sounds good. I was disappointed when I heard that a lot of the comments, maybe most of them, maybe all of them, weren't directly related to an item that was on the agenda, so we couldn't talk about them because of the Open Meetings Act. That's the way it goes, and we have to comply with that. But what I have in mind is a not meeting every day. We can't do that anyway. Or maybe not even every week, but we can have agenda items that allow us to discuss some of the things that were brought up today. And so, an update from General Nettles is obviously extremely useful. Chairman Lilly's suggestion there is right on the money as usual. But in addition to that, I want us to be able to discuss the things that people are most concerned about, the people that people took the time out from their daily lives to communicate with us about. I want to be able to talk to them about that. So that's what's on my mind, and logistics are going to be important here. Staff time is going to be important. They're constantly on the phone with people in agency and in other agencies and in the industry, and they can't spend all their time setting up meetings for us. I get that, and I'm sensitive to that, but I would like to have as many opportunities as regularly scheduled as possible to directly address the things that industry is telling us. That's my only request, and I really appreciate y'all's time, and I'll go along with whatever we have to do. Thank you.
So I think what we're going to do, a couple of things. Number one, we're going to look at this meeting date, and I agree with everyone that May 19th is too far off. The world is going to be very different by May 19th, and our industry might be very different by May 19th. So let's work on an April meeting date that will be official, and then let's work on other means and methods to communicate with industry leaders, as well as the 5 or 4 individuals that gave questions today. And the other thing is, for those that are listening in industry, I hope that you will see the sincerity. Sometimes government is given kind of a bad rap as sort of being self-serving, I think the comments that have come from the commissioners today universally have been a sincere concern about the industry that we regulate. I think these are heartfelt, compassionate men and women on our commission. And while we're not perfect and we don't always have the answers that everyone wants, and we have to move at the speed of government, which is not a snap of a finger, and I know sometimes that's frustrating. It's frustrating that what our industry wants, we can't just provide with a stroke of a pen, but that's just not the way it works. And so, but I can assure you that every commissioner on this board is doing their utmost in their respective communities to represent the agency and to be an open sounding board for comments and even criticism, which, you know, we're big folks. We can take a punch when needed. So, and thank you for the spirited conversations, comments. Again, Commissioner Mack, welcome to the firestorm. And so we thank you all. We wish you guys the best, your families, to get through these next couple of weeks. Hopefully, things will look better. So, without any other conversations or comments, I move that we adjourn. Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission, time is 12:08. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.